Let's talk about space. Space is a really fun element of the art. In a way, it's the way you show distance in an artwork. So it's the distance between, around, above, or below things. In a two-dimensional drawing or painting, it refers to the arrangement of the objects on a picture plane. And in a two-dimensional piece of artwork, it can have height and width, but no depth. And you could create the illusion of depth, create the illusion of something being three-dimensional by using perspective. Now there's a couple words that we've learned about before, positive space and negative space. So positive space is the subject or the objects in a work of art. Negative space is a space around the subjects or objects, kind of like the background. But today we're going to talk about different ways to show distance. So we've learned about some of these before, but now we're going to go into more detail. So the first one is overlapping. When an artist places one object over another object, it looks like the one is closer. So in this top box, I want you to look at these images and I want you to show me which ones are being overlapped correctly. And then think to yourself, how do I know that this is being shown correctly? So I'm going to show you some answers here. This one is correct, and this one is correct. We know that because the one object is in front of the other object and it's blocking part of it. And we know the smiley face and the circle are the closer objects. Now, a new one for you is called relative size. Relative size is the farther away something is, the smaller it is. And the closer it is, the bigger it is. So which one is closer, A or B? Which one do you think is closer? And then why? I hope you guessed A. A shows relative size correctly because the closer something is, the bigger it is. So this tree is bigger in the front. And the farther away it is, the smaller it is. This one is not correct because the smallest tree is in the front. And this also uses overlapping. Then there's something called atmospheric perspective. Atmospheric perspective is the things that are farther away seem lighter and blurrier than the objects are closer. So in this picture here, how does it show atmospheric perspective? Let's look at it. Well, I hope you said that the mountains in the front, they're darker, and the ones that are farther away, they're really fuzzy and lighter. Picture mountains when you go up to the Poconos. Those mountains, they look kind of purplish and a little bit fuzzy, but up close, they're probably either covered in snow or they're really nice, rich colors. But far away while you're driving, they are fuzzy and blurrier and lighter. Then there's also position on a paper. Placing an object higher on the page makes it appear farther back than objects placed lower on the page. So first off, which of these circles and spheres is farther away? And how can you tell? A, B, C, or D? I hope you picked D. D is farther away. So not only did this artwork here use location and position, it also used size. When something's farther away, it is also smaller. And then there are things called the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. So the foreground is the near space. It's the larger objects. Middle ground is kind of farther away, but it's not super far away. It's kind of in the middle. That's where it gets its name. And then there's the background. That's the far space. They're smaller objects. So if you were to draw a tree in the foreground, the middle ground, and the background, where would you draw it? Now, friends, these are called clouds. These are not treetops. So if I was to draw a tree in the foreground, I would draw it low and I would draw it big. If I was to draw a tree in the middle ground, I would draw it a little bit higher and a little bit smaller. And if I was to draw a tree in the background, I would make it really small and higher. Now you wouldn't draw a tree all the way up here because that would mean it is floating in space, and we don't want any trees floating in space. So as long as it's touching the horizon line, it's okay, or below the horizon line. Now you could also do overlapping in here. We already did relative size and position just by drawing our trees, but those are a couple ways to draw space. But now that you're a little bit older, let's talk about linear perspective. Linear perspective is a method of using lines to show the illusion of depth in a picture. And there's a couple words. You already know what a horizon line is. A horizon line separates the land from the sky. It's also eye level. So if you are standing in a crater and looking up, the horizon line would be higher up on your picture. If you're standing on top of a building and looking down, the horizon line would be lower because it's your eye level. Then there's something called the vanishing point. The vanishing point is where all things look like they disappear in space. It's kind of an invisible dot. All of these lines point to a dot, an invisible dot. Probably on this one, it'd be right around here. This little itty bitty dot. Every single one of these diagonal lines points to it. And those diagonal lines, they're called orthogonal lines. Those lines make things look smaller as they get farther away. So this building doesn't actually get smaller. It's the illusion of getting smaller. And all these lines point at that single dot, even the ones on the road. So that's linear perspective. And at the bottom, I want you to answer, what is a vanishing point? If you keep going, we talk about how to create one-point perspective using a horizon line, an orthogonal lines, and a vanishing point. And I have a separate video for you there to help you along the way because there's a lot of information you need to know, but it is really cool to get to do that and to create perspective correctly. I hope you have fun using space in your artwork.